Okay, so I want to read you something. The morning light fell through the dusty panes of the old church window, and Thomas felt, for the first time in years, something like grace. He couldn't name it. He didn't try. It was enough that it was there, that quiet, hovering presence, larger than his grief, softer than his doubt. He bowed his head. Whatever it was good. Now, how did that feel? Probably fine, probably moving a little, probably the kind of passage you find in a Marilyn Robinson novel or a Wendell Berry essay, or a serious literary novel that treats faith with respect and complexity. The language is beautiful. The emotional register is genuine. The experience being described feels real. And every single keyword in that passage is completely empty. Grace, presence, good, whatever it was. These words are doing exactly what literary language is supposed to do. They're creating an open space for the reader to bring their own content. That's the genius of good fiction. The skilled novelist uses emotionally resonant language that points at a category of experience, the transcendent, the peaceful, the beyond, and lets you fill it with your own version of what that feels like. It works because it's not supposed to be specific, it's supposed to be evocative. Now, the problem is that the Christian church has been writing its theology in this mode for a very long time. And theology is not fiction. And the difference between those two things is not stylistic, it's everything. Here's the distinction I want you to hold in your head for this whole video here. Fiction operates in what we might call the passive speech mode. Passive is not in the grammatical sense, though it's often a part of it, but passive in the epistemic sense. It presents experience without specifying reference. It says, something was felt, something was present, something was larger than the grief. The subject of the action is absent or unnamed. The content of the experience is available for the reader to supply. This is a feature, not a bug, in literary writing. The reader's imaginative participation is the point. The open vessel is the goal. Theology, specifically biblical theology grounded in the prophetic declaration of the Messiah, operates in the opposite mode. It specifies, it identifies. It says, this particular God who declared this particular thing at this particular time, which arrived in this particular way, confirmed by this particular correspondence between the old text and the historical event. The vessel is not supposed to be open. It's supposed to be full of content that arrived from outside the reader's imagination, that does not depend on the reader's emotional state for its truth, that can be examined and confirmed by anyone willing to look at the record that this was something transcendent. When the church writes theology in the fiction mode, it produces language that feels like theology and functions like fiction. It produces experiences that feel like faith and don't require the specific content that makes faith what it is. And it does this so consistently, so naturally, so invisibly, because the fiction mode is the dominant mode of serious literary culture, and the church absorbed it without noticing. That most Christians can't see the difference between the two kinds of language anymore. Let me show you what I mean with some examples. Here's a passage from a well-known Christian author writing about prayer. I'm not going to name them because the point isn't to criticize a person, it's to identify a mode. In the stillness of the early morning, before the world woke, she found herself in that familiar threshold place, not quite here, not quite elsewhere, where words became unnecessary and something older than language took over. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't need to. She was simply held. Did you feel that? Now, we must admit that's lovely writing, genuinely. And it's also a perfect specimen for the fiction mode applied to Christian experience. Threshold place, something older than language, simply held. Every keyword is maximally open. What is the threshold place? You supply it. What is the something older than language? You supply it. What does held mean? Well, you supply it. The passage is designed to resonate with your own experience of quiet moments that feel larger than yourself. It's written to work for as wide a readership as possible, which means it's written so that the specific content, the God who declared himself in history, the Messiah whose coming was announced before his arrival, the prophetically confirmed reality that alone distinguishes this held from any other religion's version of being held, is absent. Now, look, that's fine for a novel. For a novel, it's exactly right. The reader's imaginative participation is the point. But this isn't a novel. This is Christian devotional writing. And the specific content that makes it Christian rather than generally spiritual has been quietly replaced by the evocative, open language of literary fiction. Now here's another one, this time from a sermon. Again, not named. Friends, when we say we believe in grace, we are saying something about the character of the universe. We are saying that at the heart of things, beneath the suffering and the loss, there is a kindness that holds. There is a love that will not let us go. There is a mercy older than our mistakes. Beautifully constructed, a triple rhythm, a kindness that holds, a love that will not let us go, a mercy older than our mistakes. This is preaching as literary performance. And every key word, grace, kindness, love, mercy, is in its normed, open, maximally evocative form. Now, they are not wrong, they are empty. They could be preached from any tradition that believes in a benevolent universe. The specific content, the God who declared the Messiah before his arrival, whose love is first the ahava of the covenant, whose mercy is first the chesed of the fulfilled prophetic promise, is absent. The passive subject is doing something specific here. There is a kindness that holds, not the God who spoke through Isaiah 53 holds. There is a love that will not let us go, not the love of God who declared the end from the beginning and was vindicated by the arrival of the one who declared will not let us go. The subject is absent, the content is absent, what remains is the feeling. And the feeling is real. And that's the insidious part here. The feeling of being held, of grace, of a love larger than your mistakes. These are real experiences. They are not invented, but the specific content that makes those experiences contact with the God of the Bible rather than contact with your own protected and projected image of benevolence, that content has been filtered out by the fiction mode. And what's left is indistinguishable from any sufficiently serious literary spirituality. There's a grammatical dimension to this worth naming directly. In English grammar, the passive voice moves the subject from the sentence. The door was opened rather than John opened the door. Mistakes were made rather than I made mistakes. The passive voice is useful when the subject is unknown, irrelevant, or when the writer wants to avoid naming it. Fiction uses passive constructions extensively because ambiguity of agency creates space for the reader's imagination to fill in who or what is acting. Now, biblical theology has a subject, a specific one. The God who declared, the Messiah who arrived, the Spirit who searched what he signified. These are not anonymous forces. They are not presences or kindnesses or something older than language. They are the specific, identified, prophetically named God who demonstrated himself in history in a form that can be examined. When Christian writing adopts the passive subject, when grace arrives without an agent, when presence fills the room without being identified, when love holds without specifying whose love and on what basis, it is imported the ambiguity of fiction into the domain of theology. And that ambiguity does not does exactly what it does in fiction. It opens the vessel for the reader to fill. And really, that sounds generous, doesn't it? It sounds inclusive. It sounds like making room for the mystery of God. And it is exactly the removal of the specific content that makes the mystery of God the specific mystery it is, rather than a general category of human experience available to everyone with a sufficiently contemplative temperament. Now, let's look at some of the commentaries. What do the commentaries do? And believe, I'm just taking a few examples, but you can apply this to any of them. It doesn't matter what you apply them to, any of them. Just pick that commentary off your shelf. Remember McLaren on the parable of the lost coin. He says this: the human instinct which prizes lost things, not because of their value, but because they are lost, has something corresponding to it in the heart of the majesty of the heavens. Read that again and notice the mode. The human instinct, something corresponding to it, the heart of the majesty of the heavens. Now, this is not theological precision. This is literary evocation. McLaren is writing the parable interpretation the way a serious novelist would write a character's experience of loss and recovery, using emotionally resonant language that opens toward a general human experience rather than closing in on the specific theological content. His phrase, lost things, is normed to whatever you personally value and have lost. Heart is normed to the general emotional center of a person. Majesty of the heavens is normed to a vague impression of divine grandeur. The specific content that lost in the parable means, first, the precious, irreplaceable knowledge of the Messiah from the Old Testament, lost in a church that has been now norming its way into oblivion, is nowhere in McLaren's reading. Because that reading requires a closed vessel, it requires a specific content, and Maclaren is writing in a mode designed to produce open vessels. Now, Trapp on the Wise and Foolish Builders, he says this: the rock is Christ, and conscionable hearers and living stones built upon him. Every noun is available for redefinition. Rock is Christ, and Christ is whatever quality of firmness and reliability the reader associates with Christ. Conscionable hearers are whoever the reader considers to be sincere and serious Christians. Living stones are members of the community who are genuinely committed. Nothing here requires specific content. Everything here is available for the reader to fill with their own version of commitment, sincerity, firmness, and community. It's the grammar of the serious literary novel applied to the interpretation of a passage whose keywords have specific, irreplaceable, prophetically grounded content. Now let's take the 10 virgins for a minute. Take this quote. The 5 virgins who have the extra oil represent the truly born again who are looking with eagerness to the coming of Christ. Now, this is indistinguishable in mode from a passage of realist fiction describing a community of devout people. Truly born again, the novel's equivalent of deeply committed, a quality of sincerity available to the reader's imagination. Looking with eagerness, the novel's equivalent of anticipation, a feeling recognizable from any devotional tradition. Coming of Christ, an event whose specific prophetic content is entirely absent. Which Christ? The one predicted by Daniel 9? The one described in Zechariah 14? The specific prophetically identified, declared before his coming Messiah, whose return is no more generic than his first arrival was? The mode presents these questions from arising. Fiction doesn't raise questions about the specific referent of its evocative language. It's not supposed to. And when theology is written in the fiction mode, it inherits that suppression. Here's what I want you to understand about this, how this happened. The church didn't decide to import the fiction mode. It happened the way most cultural absorptions happen. Gradually, through the ambient prestige of a dominant literary culture, through the reasonable desire to communicate accessibility, through the genuine recognition that evocative language reaches people that technical language can't. And some of this is right. Nobody is arguing for a dry, inaccessible, theological prose that produces no feeling and connects with no one. The problem isn't that the language is beautiful. The problem is that beautiful language designed for open vessels is being used to communicate content that requires closed ones. When a novelist writes something like Grace, she is doing exactly the right thing. The open vessel is the point. When a theologian writes something like Grace, then grace is allowed to mean any experience of undeserved kindness, any feeling of being held, any moment of unexpected peace. The specific content that makes grace the specific thing the Bible calls grace has been removed. And this removal is invisible because the language is so good. the mode is so effective. The feeling is so real. And the feeling, as I keep saying, is the problem. And it's not because feelings are bad, because a feeling produced by beautifully open literary language is indistinguishable from a feeling produced by genuine contact with a specific prophetically confirmed reality of the Messiah, from the inside, from the experience of the person having it. The only thing that distinguishes them is the specific content underneath. Whether the grace is the grace of God who declared the servant in Isaiah 53 and confirmed that declaration in history. Whether the held is the held of the God who declared the end from the beginning. Whether the love is the love of God whose love has a prior declaration behind it, a prior promise behind it, a historical fulfillment beneath it, and a publicly examinable transcendent record beside it. If you remove that content, which is the fiction, which the fiction mode does automatically by design, and you have religious experience, maybe you have religious experience, genuine, powerful, sometimes life-changing religious experience, available from every tradition, sufficiently invested in the evocative use of open language, and that goes for any religion. That is not what Christ taught. He didn't open the scriptures to the disciples on the Emmaus road so they could feel something unspecifiable. He opened Moses and the prophets and showed them the specific content, the things concerning himself declared before his arrival, confirmed by his life and death and resurrection. The burning heart came from the specific content being received, not from the evocative language creating an open space for the religious imagination. The burning heart is real. The question is what produces it. Get the content right, and the feeling follows. Get the feeling first, through the fiction mode, through the open language, through the beautifully constructed open vessels, and you have the feeling without the content. And a feeling without the content is what the church has been producing with extraordinary literary skill for a very, very long time. So here's the challenge. The next time you read a piece of Christian writing, a commentary, a sermon, a devotional, notice the mode. Is it specifying or evoking? Is it closing in on a particular identifiable prophetically grounded referent, or is it opening toward a general category of spiritual experience available for the reader's imagination to fill in? Is grace the grace of God who declared the servant before his arrival? Did they mention any prophetic text? Or is it an unspecified kindness that holds? Is faith the amunah of Habakkuk 2:4, the taught, prophetically grounded orientation toward the declared Messiah? Or is it a quality of sincere commitment available in every religious tradition around the world? Doesn't have to be Christianity. Is lost the loss of the parable of the lost coin, the precious specific knowledge of the Messiah from the Old Testament, lost in the now norming church? Or is it whether you personally value and whatever you personally value and have replaced? Now, the fiction mode is powerful. It reaches people. It produces real feeling. And it systematically removes the one thing that makes the feeling contact with reality rather than contact with itself. Don't now norm. When you use these words, use them with the qualifiers that close the vessel and fill it with the content the Bible actually put there. The lost coin is the specific prophetically grounded knowledge of the Messiah. Go find it, because it's lost right now in the church, hidden in plain sight behind 2,000 years of beautifully evocative, open language that points everywhere and lands nowhere. And the God who searches for it, not the unspecified majesty of the heavens, but the one who declared the end from the beginning, is still searching.